All right. Today is Monday, July 20th. Was off today. I don't see how some of y'all have them beards on y'all face, man. After about 3 days, I feel like something on my face. I'm about to go shave tonight. Uh, we on chapter 2 of the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. The thing about the difference between novels and nonfiction books, or that, with nonfiction books, you got to take your time. I read through this, but I wanted to sit down and really like study this book. And since I have the time, I do it. So I went back and now I'm going chapter to chapter. Chapter 2 is titled Dueling Consciousness. He starts off the chapter defining 3 words: assimilationist, one who is expressing the racist idea that a racial group is culturally or behaviorally inferior and is supporting cultural or behavioral enrichment programs to develop that racial group. So you have your white liberals, you got your so-called, uppity blacks. I never understood assimilationists because you have like there's no standard, like your life is just as messed up as mine. So I never fell into that. When we have segregationists, one who is expressing the racist idea that a permanently inferior racial group can never be developed and is supporting policy that segregates away that racial group. Keyword is never be developed. I guess I would consider myself a segregationist because, just going through life and, being married one time and being divorced is like you realize that some people you're just never going to get along with. So it's best to go your separate ways. And then, when you see them somewhere in public, hey, how you doing? All right, fuck you too. But you can fake like you like them for a few minutes and then go on about your business. Like most people are like that. That's why most of you guys, y'all love the people on the internet, because you don't see them. Y'all are living with them. So it's like, you can always be pleasant. Segregationist. Malcolm X, one of my, probably the most admired man in my life. He taught that. Elijah Muhammad, hey, get your own, get away from them. You can do business if it's beneficial for both, but if not, bye-bye. You go on your side of the planet, I go on mine. I pretty much lean to that, being an introvert. But he also defines anti-racist, one who expressing the idea that racial groups are equals and none needs development. Many of y'all can't believe that. And, most people, especially in the United States of America, with all our Black Lives Matter and all our progressives, most of y'all don't believe that. Most black people, don't believe that. You feel like we should be like, well, he explains it. He talks about more about his parents, and he talks about how he was born in 1982, right when President Reagan and the Republicans started the war on drugs that, criminalized the possession of drugs, the 3 strike laws, basically the what started this mass incarceration that we lived through, that we're still living through. He goes into that. He talks about how it was a racist policy, how President Nixon, one of President Nixon's policy chiefs, even like maybe a few years ago, like basically admitted that, yeah, we put the war on drugs because we know that most of the revolutionary groups were using marijuana, cocaine, or whatever. So we criminalize drugs, then we get the larger public on our side when we start, decapitating these people. He talks about how the black middle class joined these people and said, yeah, and they pointed at the drug users and the drug sellers and said, you're erasing our gains from the civil rights movement. You're a bad look on a race, so you should be incarcerated. And he really gets into that. I'm not gonna really get into it, because I think I've went over that too much. Most people that are studying history know what happened. It's always good to brush it over, so I would say read it. You know, my thing was his definitions of assimilation and segregation. You know, basically assimilation, which is something that has never stopped, which is looks like it's on the uprise. You know, most of you guys, even on YouTube, like the way you talk. You know, I'm not one of the people that say you're talking white or whatever, but most black people, when they get around whites or whatever, their tone changes. You know, and they call the people that just are themselves everywhere, they call them ignorant. But you're the ignorant one. You know, because you're going into you're not being yourself. You're dueling consciousness. He talks about the origin of it, W.E.B. Du Bois and the Souls of Black Folks. You know, if you're American, I think we all should have read that book. You know, put it on your list. Make sure you read it. He talks about how most of the time black people in America, we see ourselves through the eyes of others. You know, we see ourselves through the eyes of whites. How would whites feel about this? How would, you know, which I always say is because the deity, you know, we've got to the point where we believe that they are a deity, you know, because of the images of Jesus and everything. So, but he talks about it. He said they reverted to striving to save and civilize black people rather than liberate them. Civilizer theology became more and more attractive in the face of the rise of crack and the damage it did to black people, as it did to so many children of civil rights and black power. You know, so he says that most of the black people turned on their own and said, "Yeah, you gotta come up. You gotta become more civilized. You gotta become more white." He says that assimilation ideas are racist ideas because they're steeped in. He says it's better. Assimilations can position any racial group as the superior standard that another racial group should be measuring themselves against, which even in our personal lives we shouldn't do. The benchmark they should be trying to reach. Assimilationists typically position white people as the superior standards. I'm going to read that again. Assimilationists, both black and white, typically position white people as the superior standard. The superior standard. White assimilationist ideas challenge segregationist ideas that claim people of color are incapable of development, incapable of reaching the superior standard, incapable of becoming white, and therefore fully human. Many of y'all believe that you're not fully human until you become like white people, stereotypical white people, because if you really get close to them, and everybody has faults. Many of you white people believe that black people will never be able to arrive, whatever that means, or make it. I had a friend who used to always say that, like, this one made it. This one made it where? You know, assimilations believe that people of color can, in fact, be developed, become fully human, just like white people. Assimilation's ideas reduce people of color to the level of children needing instruction on how to act. Oh my goodness. And the sad thing is that many people applaud that behavior. You know, I've been reading this. This is my second time going over this. And I think he's very simplistic, and I think he's oversimplistic, but man, he has a point. And so he talks about, he says white people, which ones I don't know, you know. He likes to make these labels in the book, you know. I don't know how old he is. He says he's born in 82, but it's like it has no nuance. Like, he makes these blanket terms. White people have their own dueling consciousness. between the segregationists and the assimilationists. Now there are some anti-racist white people. You can't put them all in that group. Just like you can't. He is another part. He says that all black people are either anti-racist or, for the most part, or assimilationists. But there's a lot of segregation of black people that want to be away from whites. So maybe he means his group. you know. But he says white people have generally advocated for both assimilationist and segregationist policies. People of color have generally advocated for both anti-racist and assimilationist policies. I don't know. How do we gauge that? How do we gauge that? I don't know. I wouldn't even know the percentages of it, you know. But he continues talking about the dueling consciousness, how we want to be black, but we also want to be Americans. I remember when I was young, I was at the height of my, you're a young person, 19, 20, had been reading James Baldwin and all these different Richard Wright, all these different authors for years, and I thought about I want to change my name to an African name, But then I start thinking like I'm truly American. Like, am I American? I'm a black American, but I'm truly American. The older I get more fascinated with this country. When I found out that my forebears were here before the founding of America in 1776, in the colonial times, I traced the ancestor back to Maryland before 1776. So if I'm not an American, who is? I mean, my family's been over here for years and years and years before even the founding. So I'm more American than anybody, but yet I'm black. And we always have this. He talks about how W.E. Du Bois wished that he could be a Czechoslovakian or, a Spaniard or, Italian, where he could just melt into Americana, something that, African Americans could never do because of our color, So he talks about this duel. The black body is instructed to become an American body. The American body is the white body. The black body strives to assimilate into the American body. The American body rejects the black body. The black body separates from the American body. The black body is then instructed to assimilate into the American body, and on and on and on. Many of the time we get that in our personal lives, but we reject it so long, we get to the fact where we say, hey, we're just going to separate them. But then we get people that say, well, you should be with your family, but they're constantly rejecting us. What are we to do? You're saying, okay, this is the pathway, assimilate. If we could have assimilated, we would have done that 200 years ago. If I could have assimilated a bit with my family, I would have did that years ago. They're rejecting us. So what are we to do? To be anti-racist is to conquer the assimilationist consciousness and the segregationist consciousness. The white body no longer presents itself as the American body. The black body no longer strives to be the American body because it already is. I'm adding that. It already is. Knowing there's no such thing as the American body without black people, African Americans. Only American bodies racialized by power. So this dueling consciousness that he speaks of needs to be eradicated, in my opinion. It should have been eradicated. It can be eradicated with knowledge. We are who we are. It's got to be so hard, I mean, I notice people just, in passing, and oh man, you ever met a person that just tried to be something they weren't, and they just tried so hard? Many of the so-called celebrities, like, dude, that's not you. Stop it. Like, you could see it from a mile away. And I guess that's a lot of times I feel if Like many white people, that's probably how they view blacks. Like, dude, like that's not you, dude. Like, be yourself. You're unique in your own way. You know, that's anti-racism. Not saying, okay, because this guy don't act like me, he's ignorant. No, he's himself. You're the ignorant person for judging them. You know. Chapter 2, Dueling Consciousness, was a great chapter. I implore you to read it. We'll do chapter 3 later. Peace.